Good evening, everybody. Kai Waza with you, and it's Good Friday evening. I actually had every intention of going to Good Friday services at church this evening, and I had it all planned out. And then, honestly, I was playing a Facebook game, and I didn't realize kind of how late it had gotten, and I was like, I missed my bus. I missed the last bus I could take before. So, yeah, sorry. So I figure. Well, the church's loss is your gain or your punishment, however you want to look at it. And I figured, why not just take this time to do another video on the Hawaiian record collection? It's about time for another one of those. So let's continue. We're still on the letter S. Let's check out some more records. First up, this is it's quite a pretty cover on this one, yeah? Hawaiian Guitar is the name of the album by the Stars of Hawaii Orchestra on RCA Victor. This is a 1957, I believe, yeah, 1957. Instrumental LP under the direction of Alvin Kaleolani Isaacs, and they don't list the musicians, many of whom are actually pretty well known. This is an instrumental album, Danny Stewart and others, and they must have probably been under contractual obligation with the other labels, so they couldn't use their names, so they recorded as the Stars of Hawaii Orchestra. And it's, instrumental Hawaiian steel guitar music. This is on Fontana, which is a European budget label, Hawaiian Serenade. The artists are listed as the South Sea Melodians. In fact, it's George DeFretz and his group, who's an Indonesian steel guitarist. Again, some kind of re-release budget label, so I guess they didn't use the name George DeFretz, but that's who it is. This one is a Hawaiian album, released in Hawaii in 1980, South Sea Island Magic Instrumental Island Favorites. A bit unusual for its time. There wasn't a lot of instrumental music going on around 1980 in Hawaii. This one is not typical, though, because it doesn't have any Hawaiian steel guitar on it, but it has ukulele, 12-string guitar, congas, vibes, and it sort of has a Latin feeling to it. I moved to Hawaii in 1981, and this album was getting some airplay on the Hawaiian music stations then. It's a nice one. Hula Town probably is the most well-known. Here is one from Australia on the Spotlight label, and I love the title of this. I have a couple of albums called Weekend in Hawaii. I don't really understand it because who comes to Hawaii for the weekend? That's a very long trip, but I don't know. The South Pacific Serenaders for dancing. Maybe if you came on a cruise ship, it would only stop for a day or two. I don't know, but I don't know a lot of people that go to Hawaii for the weekend. Here's another locally produced album out of Hawaii. It's called Hawaii for Lovers by the Sounds of Waikiki. This one is interesting if you like the easy listening artist Bert Kempfert. It's very much in his style with the trumpet and the bass line. We'll hear a sample of that when I do a few samples. I like this record. I don't think it got airplay on the islands. I never really heard it. It's from, I believe it's from the 80s somewhere also. Okay, now we're going to come up on a whole bunch of South Pacific records. I won't go crazy about them because it's not really Hawaiian music, but it does belong in the collection. This is the original Broadway cast of South Pacific. This one is when it came out as a film a few years later. For whatever reason, the copy I have is the British release on RCA. I don't know how exactly that happened, but this is great because it has a lot of great. It's a gatefold booklet. It has lots of great pictures in it. Great font, the only really what you could call Hawaiian song in South Pacific is Bali High. And that's a lovely song, but it does kind of get on your nerves after a while, I have to say. They wrote it The story is they wrote it on a 10-minute lunch break because they needed a song to fill in, and they thought, well, let's do a song about this island that's out there, and it became one of the bigger hits out of the film. Very memorable song. Here's Les Brown and his Band of Renown, Dance to South Pacific. These are selections from the musical in the Les Brown style. Budget label here, Diplomat Records, Al Goodman and his orchestra. Selections from South Pacific with a beautiful picture of somewhere in Tahiti, Moorea, Bora Bora, I'm not sure which one. Then we have Les Baxter, South Pacific. I got to get a better copy of this one. This is all kind of marked up by some kid. I don't see this record very often. But it's kind of interesting because it's songs from South Pacific, but Les Baxter does more exotic type arrangements of them. So that's kind of interesting. Here's another budget label, Mayfair Records. Love the picture on this, right? South Pacific, Lou Raymond Orchestra and Chorus, featuring great Hollywood vocal stars. They're so great, in fact, that they're not even listed on the back cover either, whoever they are. But actually, it is a little interesting, because this one is a yellow vinyl. Isn't that pretty? Yellow vinyl. And Norma Zimmer, you might know her from Lawrence Welk, and who else was on here? Marni Nixon does some of the songs, and she is, if you have many Exotica records, she is one of the few women that recorded a lot of the vocals on several of those albums where they're just going, whoa, because she could reach those notes. Marni Nixon. Ultraphonic label, selections from South Pacific with the Gauguin picture there, Paul Gauguin on the cover. I like this one because, it's just renditions from the film, but then the flip side has two suites from South Pacific, orchestral suites, that are kind of long, but I love this label. Ultraphonic, Halo, Allegro labels, I love them. Very old budget labels. Here's a very old budget label also. Plymouth Records, South Pacific Highlights, and Dinner Music by, I'm not even going to pronounce that, and the South Pacific selections by the Plymouth Players. And finally, for South Pacific, we have this beauty. I got this for the cover alone because I don't need any more versions of South Pacific. It's just a budget label with, unknown people, studio orchestras. But this picture is so freaking beautiful, and the font is so awesome, and she is so beautiful. I think this was taken at the International Marketplace in the 50s. She is on some other records. If you have 101 Strings, Alshire Records is kind of well known. I should show you, but she's on the cover of that one also, and some other ones. But this is loving this, okay? Loving it. So I think we'll stop there. Oh, no, we won't. We got one more little thing to show you. This is interesting. The Minuteman for Harry Disc Jockeys. These are all like 60-second versions of selections originally from the South Pacific. This is a great idea. I used to work in radio, and I told Hawaiian artists when I used to work in Hawaiian radio, if you want your record to get airplay, put at least one song on it that's 60 seconds long, because there's so many times when we're leading up to a newscast or a time signal or something that has to be done exactly at a certain time that you have like 2 minutes left or a minute and a half left, and you can really talk for 30 seconds, but you can't talk for, 2 minutes is too long. Record a song that's 60 seconds long and it will get a lot of airplay. And only a couple of them ever did that, but a couple did, and they got the point. Anyway, this one, 60-second versions, The Minuteman from South Pacific. So let's listen to a few samples of this, and I'll check you back in a second. question though I have about South Pacific, I meant to say, is out of all the versions of it, and there are a lot more versions I could get, and I kind of pick them up here and there when they're really cheap, but they're not really Hawaiian music, so I don't, worry about it too much. But why did nobody ever record a Hawaiian rendition, like album of songs from South Pacific, like just the steel guitar, vibes, ukulele? It seems kind of weird that nobody ever did an album of South Pacific in a Hawaiian style. Why did nobody ever do that? I don't know, but I've never come across it. Anyway, if you like this kind of music, you can listen to my online hobby radio station, Hawaiian Hi-Fi. The banging you probably hear in the background is the fireworks that we have every Friday night in Waikiki at 7:45. I forgot all about them. Every Friday night. Anyway, so have a happy Easter, have a good weekend, and we will talk to you later. Thanks for watching.